always 2 nights, always the same Sunday afternoon departure, regardless of how warm the visit genuinely was, regardless of how much everyone insisted you could easily stay just one more day. This specific consistency gets read as unsentimental or genuinely rigid, a strange refusal to simply relax and let the visit naturally extend a little longer. Carl Jung's understanding of a relationship requiring careful, deliberate boundaries in order to remain genuinely healthy offers a precise explanation for why this exact unchanging duration is protecting something considerably more significant than simple scheduling preference. A visit of a specific, chosen length allows an adult to remain genuinely an adult, present, engaged, and warmly connected, while a visit stretched considerably longer often begins, gradually and almost imperceptibly, reactivating old childhood roles and old childhood dynamics that a shorter, more deliberately bounded stay simply never has enough time to fully awaken. The specific, unchanging duration is not about loving your parents any less. It is about protecting the particular version of yourself and the particular version of the relationship that this exact amount of time reliably allows to remain intact. Jung's understanding adds a genuinely useful, deeper layer to why this specific boundary matters so considerably. He believed relationships, even the most genuinely loving ones, require real, deliberate structure in order to prevent old, earlier patterns from simply reasserting themselves automatically. And a parent and child relationship carries an especially strong historical pullback toward earlier, more dependent roles precisely because those roles for so many years, the only ones that particular relationship ever actually knew. A carefully chosen, consistent visit length functions as a genuine protective container, allowing real warmth and real connection to occur, without accumulating the kind of extended proximity that tends to gradually erode the adult, mutual relationship back into something considerably closer to its original childhood shape. This explains why the specific consistency so often produces a genuinely better, warmer visit overall, rather than a shorter or somehow lesser one. Since a visit protected by real, deliberate boundaries tends to remain genuinely enjoyable throughout its entire chosen duration, while a visit extended past its natural, comfortable length often begins accumulating exactly the kind of quiet friction and gradual regression that makes everyone, including the parents themselves, secretly relieved once the visit finally actually ends. Here is what makes this understanding genuinely important rather than simply an explanation for an apparently rigid habit. This specific pattern deserves real honest respect rather than gentle suggestion toward greater flexibility, since the consistency itself is very often doing considerable genuine work, protecting a relationship that both people involved actually want to remain warm, rather than protecting one person from an obligation they secretly wish to avoid. Here's what actually helps in working with this understanding directly. If you recognize the specific pattern in your own life, it helps to trust your own chosen duration rather than apologizing for it or explaining it defensively, since this consistency reflects genuine, considered care for the relationship's actual longer-term health, considerably more than any lack of genuine affection for the people you are actually visiting. There is a second thing worth understanding directly. If you are the parent on the receiving end of this specific consistent pattern, it helps to recognize this boundary as a genuine sign of a healthy adult relationship, rather than as evidence of insufficient closeness or insufficient love, since a child who protects this exact structure is very often working quite deliberately to keep the relationship itself genuinely healthy across considerably more years than a single extended visit would ever actually allow. There is a third genuinely important piece worth naming. The same underlying principle applies considerably beyond visits to parents specifically, extending to any relationship carrying a genuine historical pullback toward earlier, less mutual roles, and recognizing when a deliberate, consistent boundary is actually protecting the relationship, rather than limiting it, is a genuinely valuable skill worth applying considerably more broadly. If you recognize this specific pattern of keeping visits to a consistent, chosen length, hear this clearly. This was never rigidity or a lack of genuine sentiment. According to Jung's understanding, it very often reflects real, deliberate protection of a relationship. You genuinely want to remain warm, and this deserves honest recognition rather than the gentle criticism it has so often unfairly received instead. Think honestly about your own visits to family and consider whether a consistent, deliberately chosen duration might actually be protecting the warmth of the relationship rather than limiting it. Right below the single word for what you suspect this consistent boundary is actually protecting in your own specific relationship. Naming it honestly and trusting your own chosen duration rather than apologizing for it is the real and practical way you begin honoring a genuinely healthy pattern rather than continuing to mistake it for rigidity. There is a final piece worth naming since it offers real, practical reassurance to anyone who is quietly worried that this specific pattern reflects a lesser or more distant relationship. The consistency itself is often precisely the evidence of the opposite, since a person who did not genuinely care about preserving the relationship's actual quality would have considerably less reason to protect it this deliberately, extending visits carelessly and simply absorbing whatever fiction eventually followed, rather than actually taking the trouble to protect the exact shape that keeps things genuinely good. Because visiting your parents for exactly the same length of time every single visit was never, according to Carl Jung's understanding, rigidity or a lack of genuine sentiment. It very often reflected real, deliberate care, protecting a length that lets love genuinely stay love, and understanding this honestly was always more accurate than the gentle criticism this careful, consistent boundary has so often unfairly received instead.